Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts on Dancer in Dawntrail. Now, obviously, I made this video like a month and a half ago when I played it at Media Tour, but that was based on like 5 to 10 minutes of getting to play the job, which, you know, I have experience on the job, so I was able to piece together what I felt like was reasonable thoughts, but I've now played it on the live servers. I've leveled it from 90 to 100, and it did undergo some very important adjustments between what I played in Media Tour and what I actually got to play now. So these are my updated live server Dawntrail thoughts on Dancer. Before the video kicks off though, it does have a sponsor, Magic Spoon. They've been sponsoring the channel for a while now with their wholesome, high quality, high protein cereal, and they're back again. Between long raid hours in my games and big workouts at the gym, I'm always looking for more high protein calorie sources that are really easy for me to just get and go, especially since too many carbs just kind of makes me sleepy. For something quick and easy, I grab my Magic Spoon cereal. I'll just graze with it, honestly. I'll pick it right out of the bag or pour it in a bowl first, but the spoon, I'm definitely more of a hands-on kind of person. Besides, it sates my snacking needs too. Or I'll honestly grab a treat bar, especially right when I come back from the gym, and it's got 4 awesome flavors for me to choose between, and I love all of them. If you'd like to try Magic Spoon while also supporting the channel, then click the link below to get some today. Build your own custom box of cereal with tons of available flavors, or throw some treat bars in there if you want something on the go. Best of all, use my link and discount code Mr. Happy to get $5 off of your box. And if you don't like it, Magic Spoon has a 100% happiness guarantee. Let them know if you didn't like it and they'll refund you, no questions asked. So click the link below or scan the QR code on the screen and use code Mr. Happy to get $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/Mr. Happy and save $5 on your order. And it even works in Canada and the UK. Thanks again to Magic Spoon for sponsoring, and now back to the video. Now, I know we're almost 2 weeks past early access period, but I'm still giving spoiler warnings on the type of footage you'll see. For the most part, I leveled with Fates, and then I pretty much just did the extreme trial with Dancer, and I've like gone and messed around on the new Stone Sky Sea equivalent, which exists over in the 5th zone. So if you don't want to see any of that stuff, click away, or at least just stop watching the video and just listen to it. But this is your fair spoiler warning. So a bit of history with me with Dancer. It's really been the job that I've fallen back on since it was released in Shadowbringers. It's really comfortable, it's really mobile, and while its performance has been questionable, it's very swingy and it's really more like a battery to your strongest player, it's still a staple amongst physical ranged players of all skill levels, both because it's easy and because it does offer a wide amount of support. What they did in Dawntrail was they doubled down on the consistency of your burst window while leaving in some of the RNG elements that may entice you or frustrate you, depending on if you're me trying to wait for feathers and it's really important because the DPS check is tight and then they never pop. Okay, I'm sorry, this is getting personal. No, yeah, they've left the feathers part in, but they've just made the burst window way more consistent and fun. Almost the first thing you notice immediately is the addition of the Last Dance button. It's a follow-up to Standard Step that basically does a free Saber Dance worth of potency every 30 seconds and twice during your openers, just because of the way that it works. It gives you a much more reliable output. It gives you another button that doesn't generate Esprit, which I actually think is super important to have buttons that don't generate it, because it allows the amount you get from your teammates to largely fuel what you get without you adding into the mix. So it's a big plus for me. I will say this with Last Dance though, and I didn't think about this with Media Tour. I get why it's a separate button from Standard Step, but it was kind of weird for me because I was really content with where everything was, and I didn't really have a good spot for Last Dance. I found one, it works fine, and it's not an issue, but it was, I don't know. I get why it's an extra button. It was just, it threw me off for a little bit at first. However, one big change that they made from Media Tour that I actually don't know how I feel about is that in Media Tour, when you pressed Flourish, it reset the cooldown of Standard Step and changed it to finishing move. So you essentially would standard and then you would use Flourish and you would immediately get finishing move back. So, you know, you could essentially do the double Last Dance. Now with a 15-second countdown opener for Dancer, that doesn't really change, but Flourish no longer resets Standard Step to finishing move. And I think there's a few reasons why. I don't remember exactly how it interacted with the cooldown, but I'd assume one reason is so that standard step's cooldown doesn't get reset. I think it did in the Meteor build, but also because the standard openers tend to kind of move towards that anyway, so it's a little redundant. And I think it works better now, but it was kind of exciting hitting Flourish and just getting that standard cooldown back. It's one of those things that's really cool when you see it, but in practice, with the way Final Fantasy XIV works, it doesn't work out too well. But you still get the double last dances in the openers as long as you have the long countdown. I don't remember what the 5-second countdown one looks like off the top of my head. I think there's a last dance near the very end of your buff window that's possible, but yeah, it's that one's going to be a little bit up in the air. I feel the fact that finishing move is instant is going to be a huge improvement to the 5-second countdown version of Dancer, which I had to become very, very familiar with top chain pulls. So I am looking forward to it in that case, but it just changes the interaction a little bit from what I initially experienced in Meteor. And speaking of finishing move, adding that after Flourish for the instant standard step it's kind of a small thing to me, but being able to avoid that wind up for standard step when buffs are counting down and just continue with your rotation, I mean, that just feels really nice. And the extra last dance as well. I mean, the finishing move plus last dance plus, you know, your standard step, like you do a lot of dancing now in your openers, your reopeners. Heck, you do it all the time. And I know that last dance is really more like a standard GCD. It's less of a dance move, but it's tied to your dance moves. And the more they move in that kind of job identity direction, for me, it's always a plus. And honestly, the other bit of it, Dance of the Dawn, like this, the thing that changes Saber Dance into the massive nuke during your 2-minute window, it's so nice. I mean, A, it's visually amazing. B, it hits really hard. Like, of course, it has the damage swingy bit. If it doesn't direct hit or crit, it really sucks. But the fact that you have Devilment helps at least a little bit with that, or it just makes it more disappointing when it doesn't direct hit or crit. But that's just me. I'm just getting a little personal with that one. But Dance of the Dawn, I also just love. Honestly, I think the most impactful and honestly the most overlooked change by the devs themselves is to Talana. So Talana had a 1.5 second recast after you used it before. Now it has a 2.5 second recast, which quite frankly, I appreciate. More opportunities to double weave when you have a lot of feathers is really important on Dancer. Of course, when you don't have a lot of feathers, it's just a reminder that you don't have a lot of feathers, but so be it. It just took a little bit of adjustment. I kept thinking my GCD was going to come up sooner, and so I wasn't playing to it initially quite as well, but that's fine. It's the other thing they did to Talana, which on one hand makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, they clearly didn't think it all the way through. So Talana now grants you 50 Esprit when you use it, which ensures that you are able to access Dance of the Dawn. This is especially prevalent when you're doing something like Stone Sky Sea or even practicing on a dummy, where the generation of your gauge is not really that good. Like, you could pull out your Chocobo and just let them hit and hope that you get some procs to kind of emulate, at least you have the dance partner. But it just sucks to see Dance of the Dawn, you know, usable, but you don't have the gauge. And that did happen during Meteor. However, you may notice that Talana doesn't grant you a buff that grants you a free Dance of the Dawn / Saber Dance. It grants you 50 gauge. Every other job in the game stopped doing this in Dawntrail. They all went, oh, okay, you know, you just get a buff that lets you do a free hypercharge or free this or free that. And then you can tell they just kind of threw the Dancer change in there almost at the last minute and just said, yeah, just make it give 50 gauge. You know, maybe they wanted dancers to feel like Esprit management was an important part of their job. And I don't technically disagree, but you have to admit it's a little strange to just decide that this one ability is going to work different. But I guess as a Fizz range, I'm kind of used to it. I mean, Machinist, they basically said that the ping issue didn't exist when I was going into Endwalker. I asked Yoshi P why the feedback hadn't led to any changes to Hypercharge, and they said, well, we tested at 150 ping, and it seems fine. And I was flabbergasted, as was the entire Machinist community about that one. That was the same time I asked, I think, about the Dark Knight changes as well, and why they didn't get charges on Blood Weapon. So honestly, it's kind of par for the course that one Fizz range just gets a change that's like, technically what you're doing around everything else is kind of okay, but this one thing just doesn't fall in line with the design aspects of the rest of the expansion. It's fine. It's easy enough to play around. You just choose not to use it immediately in your reopeners, and then you gauge how much, well, gauge that you have. If you have over 50, you can basically look at your gauge while you're doing tech step and make the judgment call at that point. If you're just going to Dance of the Dawn immediately, if you're going to Talana immediately and then Dance of the Dawn. So there's room to make decisions, and I at least like that there's some skill expression. It just stands out as like a, they didn't think it all the way through. And honestly, I don't think it's going to stay that way for very long. I think that's a 0.01 or a 0.05 change that they're going to make, just because there's no way they haven't seen people talk about how it's so weird that it's the only one that's really that different. And honestly, what else is there to really say about Dancer? I mean, it's kind of always held to be about the same job with just getting a couple of extra buttons. And that's kind of been the thing for Shadowbringers jobs and onward. They've kind of just hung in a limbo where they seem largely the same, and they get something added that makes a lot of sense and doesn't really... It doesn't put the job in a place where you're like, I have no idea what else they could do. Like, would I have thought of a standard step follow-up with Last Dance? No. Does it have a lot of practical use? Yes. And it's good to see them make very simple decisions that are more engaging. One of my favorite things about Dancer, again, is Last Dance, because it's more engaging to the job. It's nice to get something that wasn't just an extra button to press every 2 minutes. It actually factors into your 2-minute buff window and factors into the priority GCDs that you need to do towards the end of it. Like, you still have to juggle your gauge and how much you have. If you have a, you know, over, I think it's 80 gauge, then you have to make sure you're either Dance of the Dawn or Saber Dance, or, you know, you have Starfall. Like, you have like 6 different possibilities, 5 or 6 different possibilities towards the end of your buff window, and you still have to do that little juggle there on top of managing the fan RNG and trying to store that up. So the amount of micro skill expression on the job is still pretty good. That being said, Dancer is still a job that largely feels like at the lower to mid skill level, or I guess even at the, I guess calling it skill level is weird, but yeah, I mean, I guess that is what it is. Like, when you're not like trying to play it like, you know, in a Giga Chad way, you know, you're not trying to play it at its absolute peak. It struggles a little bit because the people around you are very likely playing at that same skill level, and the job is weaker in that particular case. But if you're playing it really well and the people around you aren't, that also impacts it really negatively. But if you're playing it really well and everyone around you is, then you feel really amazing. So the fact that it's really still only online during that time, and even with all that in mind, is not contributing as much as the other Fizz range. It's just like a really weird place to be, where the only place it feels like it's really being utilized how it's supposed to be is like the top 1% of people who do hard content, not even of all the player base, of the people who do harder content. And I don't know. I still don't know how that feels, because I really like the comfort of being able to play this job when I just want to be able to analyze fights and shot call and do whatever. But I feel like I'm actively like working against my team, because not everyone's going to be playing at that pinnacle level, including me, while I'm learning something. So I feel like I'm kind of setting the whole thing back. Now, it's not to say that you can't raid on this job. It's not a good raid job. I think especially for players looking for a comfort pick, it's vital that something like this exists. I just wish that even after these changes that put more onus on you to control your damage windows, that it wasn't so reliant on other teammates being strong for you to feel like you have the amount of contribution that you have. It's why, if you're good at Machinist and you can play at like even an average to above average skill level, it's still kind of my go-to recommendation, even if when you look at the charts and the numbers, like Bard is doing really good. And again, at that like highest percentile, that Dancer is also doing really good. But Machinist just has that reliability. It doesn't have to rely on teammates other than for them to press their buffs so you can utilize them. And that comes with a lot of value. Whereas Dancer, there's onus on everyone to perform well for the job to do well. And I just don't know if we're going to keep going in a direction where players are okay with that. It's hard to tell. The only reason it's okay is because all of the Fizz range role, even with what I'm saying in mind, is relatively close to each other, and they're nowhere near like the Melees or Pictomancer or anything. Whereas, you know, with the disparity with the casters with Summoner and Red Mage right now, and even an Endwalker, it's a lot tougher because they're being taxed based on the ability to res. Fizz range seemingly are still being taxed on the ability to run around and move, which technically might be more valuable this expansion. We haven't had a real raid fight that isn't an extreme trial to judge if the Fizz range tax is more needed now. And maybe if the raises are more valuable now, and that really circumvents a lot of what the discussion we're having. But we're trying to analyze based on what we've experienced and what we know. And Dancer, I think, could probably still swing things upward a little bit with the consistent part of its 2-minute buff window, or even the consistency outside of buffs. I don't know. I just would like to see the entire role brought up, and Dancer is, you know, being on average lower than the other two. I feel like it could use it more. But again, I'm not saying you can't raid on it. If you enjoy it, play it. It really doesn't matter. I guess I'm analyzing it at like a high level. Or I guess that's not even at a high level. It's technically at a low level, but, you know, it's technological terms. I'm analyzing it at a deeper level than what matters to most people. And what matters is that it plays better, it feels better now, and it still has all the strengths it had before, between having a shield, the AoE heal when your group is all stacked up, having the mitigation, which, you know, is all of them have it, but the fact that it's all stacked up, being able to fix mistakes with Anavant really easily is also ultra valuable. So, a lot of positives still. I just wish it was a little stronger. That is all. That is all. But that's going to be a wrap for my thoughts on Dancer in Dawntrail. Let me know what your thoughts are on the job in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned. I'm still in the process of leveling a bunch of jobs. I am working through the MSQ, so I've slowed down on leveling jobs. But we've got normal modes next week. So we got savage modes in 3 weeks from when I'm recording this. So plenty of content to look forward to on the channel. So be sure to stay subscribed. Anyway, I will see you in the next one. And until then, take care.